Vamos ubicando cómo va a ser la dinámica ahora en la tarde. Vamos a tener esta sesión que se llama Desafíos de la inteligencia artificial, reflexionando sobre condiciones iniciales para el desarrollo de la inteligencia artificial en sus próximas fases. La presentación inicial va a estar a cargo de Jerome Glenn, luego Clem Besol, luego la señora Latifa Al-Abdukarim, y va a estar moderado el panel por la señora Lidia Garrido. Les voy avisando que después tendremos un coffee break y vamos a participar en los talleres que ya están distribuidos. Ustedes habrán elegido, y si no, lo irán haciendo en los talleres que van a tener lugar inmediatamente después del coffee break de esta sesión. Allí vamos a tener un ratito en el coffee break para elegir los grupos. ¿Elegimos los grupos? ¿Cómo se eligen los grupos? Mostrame, tráeme después para... A ustedes les habrán entregado, les voy recordando mientras empieza el panel, los workshops. It is very, very important, the workshop. Yes. And you have to, okay. Estas son para elegir los workshops. Se están repartiendo. Para elegir el workshop. Para elegir el workshop. They are handing the paper to select the workshop. It is very important because after that we will work in workshop. The workshop are distributed on language: Spanish, English, and other multilingual. How can I say multilingual? Multilanguage. So, please, vayan eligiendo el workshop para el trabajo posterior a esta sesión.
Estos son los números. El mismo taller se hace en español y en inglés, y este es multilingüal. Estos acá tienen el plano donde están cada una de las salas de acá. Atrás.
In this paper, 4 workshops in Spanish, 3 in English. 4 en español, 3 en inglés, and the last one here, multilingual workshop.
Te están traduciendo, así que puedes hablar.
Sí, pero porque algunos no tienen.
Okay.
En el otro lado de la hoja hay un plano del Palacio Legislativo, pero vamos a estar ayudando a encontrar los lugares. Los lugares son todos cerca en este espacio, así que los vamos a encontrar fácil, o al menos vamos a arribar prontamente porque están cercanos. Otro aspecto importante que quiero que sepan: luego de las disertaciones, de las ponencias de los disertantes, vamos a tener 20 minutos para intervenciones de 2 minutos cada uno para preguntar o comentar sobre el tema que vamos a abordar. Reitero, mientras se van ubicando, reitero, luego de las ponencias de los panelistas, vamos a dar un tiempo de intervención. Yo les voy a pedir que me vayan levantando la mano y los vamos a ir identificando para intervenir. 2 minutos por cada parlamentario para comentar o preguntar sobre el tema que estamos tratando, que en esta tarde va a ser un tema central que tiene que ver con el Summit. Bien, por lo tanto, si les parece, damos inicio a este panel y le paso la palabra a la señora Lidia Garrido. No toquen.
Muy buenas tardes. Good afternoon. Honorable members of parliament, authorities, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much and welcome to Uruguay again. So we will have a very interesting panel. I will speak in Spanish, so if you can use the translation. Tienen por favor ahí un QR, si pueden tomarle una foto o captarlo, eso los va a llevar a una encuesta. De todas maneras también la van a tener colgada en línea en la página del Summit en IPU. Les agradecemos si pueden completarla y tienen que ver justamente con los aspectos o con uno de los aspectos que estamos trayendo a este Summit, a esta cumbre, que refiere a justamente capacidades y competencias dentro del ámbito parlamentario para esto que podríamos decir de manera genérica como el uso del futuro en el presente. Una de las formas concretas son las comisiones de futuros, que es lo que nos convoca, esta segunda cumbre mundial de comisiones de futuros en parlamentos. Bien, antes de comenzar también a agradecer a 25 centros educativos que nos están acompañando en estos momentos. Han estado desde la mañana y ahora en la tarde continúan. El sistema de educación secundaria está acompañando este Summit. Están realizando talleres, los van a hacer de manera simultánea a los que ustedes hagan y nos van a estar haciendo llegar sus aportes. También tenemos acompañándonos en este formato dual, híbrido, a miembros del Parlamento de Paraguay y a prospectivistas del CEP en Asunción, también a quienes saludamos, están siguiéndonos y realizando ellos sus actividades de manera paralela. Bien, dicho esto, entonces vamos a entrar de lleno al panel que nos convoca esta tarde para colocarnos en la reflexión de la temática o de uno de los componentes principales de las temáticas de esta cumbre, que tiene que ver con mirar la inteligencia artificial en su condición inherente evolutiva. Como bien se dijo, la inteligencia artificial o los modos de inteligencia artificial que hoy tenemos, vivimos, hemos desarrollado, no es algo que recién haya aparecido, tiene más de 70 años. Lo diferente es las características que tiene y sobre todo el potencial en su carácter evolutivo. Es por eso que esta tarde le hemos denominado navegar la transición hacia el futuro de la inteligencia artificial, o podríamos decir lo mismo, ir navegando y reflexionando para generar las condiciones iniciales de la inteligencia general artificial. Y es sobre este tema, para acompañarnos diferenciando las distintas fases desde una inteligencia artificial, como se le denomina, estrecha o angosta, orientada a una única tarea, a una fase siguiente de la inteligencia artificial, ya con un carácter general y con capacidades de autonomía. Y una tercera fase de superinteligencia artificial. Sobre esto nos va a estar hablando Jerome Glenn, quien tengo aquí al lado mío. Él es director del Millennium Project, es un think tank mundial que tiene más de 30 años, con 70 nodos en todo el mundo y que articula a más de 2.000, 3.000 futuristas de distintos ámbitos. Desde el Millennium Project se viene contribuyendo en el Comité Internacional de Ingeniería y Electrónica, por la sigla en inglés IEEE. Ha escrito diversos informes sobre inteligencia artificial y actualmente está abocado a un paper para el secretario general de Naciones Unidas en inteligencia artificial. También nos está acompañando el señor Clem Besol. Él es un futurista con una amplísima trayectoria en lo que tiene que ver justamente con esto del uso sistemático y riguroso del futuro a nivel del gobierno, de la toma de decisión. Justamente comenzó sus estudios de foresight, de prospectiva, en el Congreso de Estados Unidos. Es asesor de gobiernos, de corporaciones, de comunidades en todos los continentes, de la Comisión Europea, de la Organización Mundial de la Salud, del Gobierno de Estados Unidos y de muchas legislaciones y agencias. Tenemos también con nosotros el placer de recibir a la doctora Latifa Al-Abdul Karim, miembro del Shura Council del Parlamento de Arabia Saudí, profesora asistente de Inteligencia Artificial y de Derecho, asesora global en temáticas de ética de la inteligencia artificial y en su aplicación a la gobernanza. Esperamos entonces con este panel poder ir contribuyendo a lo que ya se fue planteando durante este día, en esta cuestión de contexto, podríamos decir, de cambio de era que estamos viviendo, que nos demanda, nos requiere determinadas formas que puedan acercar el futuro al presente para mejor informar la toma de decisión. Entonces, dicho esto, cedo la palabra al señor Jerome Glenn. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Lydia. As Lydia explained, there are three kinds of artificial intelligence in general. There's a little bit of gray area between each one, but as a general, simple classification, you got three. One, the narrow intelligence, which has been discussed to a large degree around the world and here most of the morning. Two is the artificial general intelligence, which now may be starting to be rephrased as frontier intelligence. We'll see how that works out on public relations. And the third one is superintelligence, and I'll get a bit into that later on, but essentially superintelligence is the general intelligence that evolves beyond our understanding, beyond our control, and beyond our ability to manage at all. In a similar way that you may be able to shape your children, but when they become adults, they're not under your control anymore. Some people say we should outlaw superintelligence altogether. I don't know if that's possible, but I'm going to be talking today just about the second one, artificial general intelligence. But before I do, I want to congratulate Finland for initiating this whole process. Began last year. This is fabulous. And Lydia and the professor and the rest of the parliament here taking it on the next step. I think this is fabulous. It's a wonderful contribution, and it's probably one of the most important things in my 50 years of futures research, because managing the transition from narrow AI to general, I believe, is the most complex management problem we have ever faced in civilization. Thank you very much. Now, but don't applaud too quickly, because the responsibility of managing this is in Parliament. You're the guys and the gals who are going to write the rules. So the pressure of the most important question in the history of civilization, in my judgment, is in this body's hands to move forward. So this potentially is a historic meeting. The Committee for the Future started, as you know, the first one in Finland, and I would like to point out two reasons that if you're going to create your own Committee for the Future, I would ask you to do two things. One, why were they successful? One, because they didn't allocate money, they allocated questions, knowledge, impact statements of all the other committees and the Prime Minister's office. Because once you allocate money, it's politics. Once it's politics, then the real truth of issues might not come forward as well. Secondly, they were able to comment on everybody else's stuff and initiate questions and so forth. So I think that those are two things that if you're going to do it in your own country, please do those, I would suggest. Now, as was mentioned, the Secretary General, the Security Council, has already agreed we're going to have a committee of experts, private sector, university, business, corporations, governments, to put together the framework for managing artificial narrow so far, and I'm trying to push them to do both. Now, granted, there's different kinds of regulations for different kinds of AI. Okay, fine. But you got to begin, and we're beginning with Secretary General's office. And that office you should be coordinating with in your own national legislations, so that as things evolve, you're evolving together in a good way. And the point person is referred to as the envoy, Secretary General's envoy on technology. So that's the person that to collaborate with to make this thing go. All right. One of the implications, we just had a preliminary meeting September 20th. I think one of the key implications of this is that there is a sense that global regulation is inevitable. Last year, it wasn't even discussed. So this is moving very fast. Another implication for this is that we're going to have a UN convention on AI. I would like it to be a convention on artificial general intelligence, but they'll probably lump them together. But in any case, and you're going to be asked to ratify it. So you're going to have to get, to deal with this. It's got to be ratified by the legislative functions around the world. Then you have to have an artificial intelligence UN agency to enforce the convention. And so far, the Secretary General has said, yes, I welcome that. But no country has introduced it in the General Assembly yet. You could be the first. Somebody's going to do it first. We'll see. All right. Let's see what else we got on here. Ta-dum, 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 ta-dum. Oh, yeah. On the harmony between your work and the Secretary General's office work, example is we all have looked at the idea of managing artificial intelligence, and one key thing is, how do you turn it off? If something goes wrong. I mean, we're talking about, again, general intelligence, the advanced stuff, not the narrow stuff, the advanced stuff that can really get out of control. Well, the software itself should have an auditing system built in that's 24 hours, 7 days a week, all the time. It's not a one-time audit like finance. It's continually auditing. When something goes outside of the guardrails, the rules, or whatever, it should immediately turn off and notify the human. If something malfunctions but it doesn't turn off, it notifies the human to turn it off. If the human can't turn it off, it should have an automatic function to your state, whatever government regulatory system you have. That agency should have an automatic receive system to send back a signal to freeze. If that doesn't work, you can tell I've done some engineering. Things always don't work. And then it goes right from there to whatever the UN creates as a regulatory body. If we don't have, from software to user to nation to UN, real time, real fast, on-time auditing, then we will lose control. I think it's inevitable. So this is a very important part. But that's why the harmony, as you develop your own rules, do it in harmony with the UN, and vice versa, because you can teach each other. And I hope that you'll all share documents with each other, because I understand there's going to be a network of parliamentary groups after this is over, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so then one of the things that as one country starts to put together its rules, it draft. I mean, it doesn't have to be finished product. You're just beginning. This is going to be the most complex thing to put together. And it's going to be changed, and it's going to be changed, and it's going to be changed, and it's going to be changed. But so the early drafts got to go back and forth among you so you learn from each other. This is really complex stuff. Okay, now, I mentioned before there's three kinds of artificial intelligence. The artificial intelligence that drives a car does not diagnose cancer. They have narrow functions. General intelligence can do all kinds of things acting as if it were conscious. I'm not saying that artificial general intelligence is conscious or will be conscious. I'm saying it's going to act as if. Now, it may end up conscious, I don't know. But it is at least going to act as if it's an independent agent and duplicating. And it may not just, and it's not going to be just one artificial general intelligence, AGI. There's going to be thousands and millions of these potentially. Well, I want that to sink in. So imagine advanced AI forming alliances and clubs, new kinds of capabilities from which emerge the super stuff. So that's why we've got to start working on managing it now, because if it goes into that state with no control, I'm going to look for asylum somewhere off the planet. The third one, of course, as I just mentioned, that's the one that we lose control potentially of. Now, you'll notice the red in there. The only way, we can't control how artificial super evolves. By definition, it evolves beyond our understanding. But what we can control is how it evolves. And that's how artificial general intelligence begins. You know, it's the old story, you put little cuts down the river, and that you can control the flow of the water. So if we don't have good controls between narrow and general, and we're looking at a few years now. So this means we should be not nervously panicking, but panicking in the sense we got to start to write drafts of rules today and sharing among each other, because it's going to take you several years easily to get this together. This is tough stuff. But we got to start now, because some people think that artificial general intelligence could occur now within 3 to 5 years. 2 years ago, people would say 50 years to maybe never. Last year, they started to say 20 to 10 years. Now they're saying 3 to 5 years. So the legislature, you guys are the thing that cuts across the whole management system, the implementation of the world, because the UN can set this overall standards, like the International Atomic Energy Agency, but the implementation is still within countries. And that's determined by you guys. A quick way, easy to think about this, is the human body. We have an autonomic nervous system. Each one is like narrow AI. They have single functions. But the brain is general. And that's the stuff that we're looking at now. AI is expected to do artificial general intelligence is expected to do all kinds of things, but essentially, imagine that it can create novel solutions to novel problems in ways way beyond, or like us, but probably beyond, our ability to put together the strategies. Like, for example, you could say, figure out and solve the Middle East problem. Well, it's going to make phone calls to different organizations and pretend to be human. It's going to go through different treaties. It's going to do all kinds of things like in a couple of minutes. Where us, it would take a bunch of jet planes, and I mean, so it's going to really speed up solution stuff, as was said earlier this morning. Now, Mr. Putin said whoever runs AI runs the world. China says in the last document, we're going to do it by 2030. So we got a race going on. There's a human brain project, because the understanding the brain and understanding AI has a relationship. It's not a one-to-one correlation, but we can learn from each other. That's a race going on now. Then you've got artificial brains being created by the main corporations of the world, and they're in a race. So you put all this together, and the great AI brain race is engaged now. That's the race, the serious race, in my judgment, what's happening. But needs national and international governance, the subject of this meeting. One thing that people are not looking at well is the role of organized crime. You do a Google search on how much money organized crime makes on an annual basis from cybercrime. And then another one, how much money do businesses lose because of cyber stuff? It's gigantic. It's bigger than all the military budgets of the world combined. They're an actor in this game. We've got to figure out how to include them in some way. But you take terrorism use of it, the corruption use of it, information warfare was mentioned about how it's going to mess up elections and truth and all of that. So all of that would make democracy and free markets an illusion. So the general intelligence goes beyond our understanding, but how that goes is controlled by how well we get the AGI going. And so we got to avoid this problem. Some of the things with artificial governance, and I'll see if I read my notes. So these guys are too far away for me to see. What did I put here? Let's see. It is argued, it was argued earlier this morning, saying you can't govern something that isn't here yet. And if you put governance in and rules in too soon, you're going to stifle development. I say hogwash. Why? It's going to take you 2 to 3 years if you're really going fast to get this done. Well, in 2 or 3 years, this is when this is available. So you're not going to stop anybody tomorrow morning. So it's a fallacious argument. We've got to do both simultaneously. Yeah, how are we doing on time?
5 minutes.
Okay, all right, so halfway through there. Let's see what else we got on here. I just explained that, good. All right, so we can go through there. By the way, I hope this PowerPoint will be made available to all the people. Okay, good. Okay, some examples of guardrails, and these are things that you guys can start to work on now. What do you think? And do literature searches on everybody else's stuff, but some examples of guardrails. The values conversation I am very satisfied with. You've got a good conversation of values and principles in UNESCO. You got another set very good in OECD, and the partnership on AI. There's a lot of work's been done. I don't see any reason for everybody to repeat the same thing. Take everybody's stuff, put it together, prioritize it your own way. But I wouldn't hold a conference on values because a lot of work has already been done very well on that. And I'm on the IEEE thing. I mentioned they're already putting together these definitions, so a lot of good work was on that already. Massively complex simulation. Oh, that's another one. We want to be able to have a producer of AGI, maybe even narrow, but certainly for general. We want them to be able to prove that their software in simulations and testing can work within the guardrails. If it cannot, it doesn't get your license. The government should give it a license after it's proven that the continuous auditing on the testing works, and then the UN can certify a government's licensing procedure so that the people understand there's global standards in general, but there's also local ones as well. Let's see here. Ability for humans to check why. This is a tough one. When they're... You didn't download the reading app yet? The mind reading app? Anyway, okay. So we're still back to regular stuff. All right, another one too is to be able to diagnose a decision. That's going to be tough because we can't even do it with large language models today. So I don't know how we're going to be able to do that in general, but we should try. By the way, for those of you who have studied the issue of alignment of values with the AI software, they've studied this issue, you'll notice that some people have thrown up their hands saying it's not possible, and some people say, well, it may be impossible, but we have to try, and I'm of that camp. It's one thing to say we want AI to do A, B, and C. Okay, implement it. It's tougher than it looks. But in any case, when you hear people get later on, because as you do this over the next year or two, you're going to hear people saying it's not possible. And you say, sorry, we got to try. And I would say back, if those of you with the grayer hairs around here, remember that preventing World War III was supposedly impossible. Historians say whenever two or more great powers confront each other, they use the weapons of the day. Well, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. You know, I remember people saying, you know, is World War III inevitable? The hands would go up. It was inevitable. Well, it didn't happen. So the impossible was made. And I think we have the same attitude here. Very important. But we won't get there if we don't start today. Because it's the old story about one step for a long journey. You got to start with one. The other one I mentioned before, you got to figure out how it cannot turn off its off switch. Now, someone this morning said, very intelligently said, how do you manage something that's smarter than you? And the answer is you use a single-purpose software, and that's a so you're using a single-purpose software, actually, to manage a more complex system, which is not completely crazy, because you have all kinds of very strong people managed by very weak people. We figured out how to do this in civilization. Let me jump ahead. You can see these later on, because I know we don't have a whole lot of time here. Let's see, also, but do take a look at this and come up with your own list. Now, there's different modes of managing from the world basis and from the national. It was said very wisely this morning that a lot of people are saying, well, create something like an International Atomic Energy Agency at the UN level and a version of that at the national level. Okay, fine. And very wisely they said, yeah, but that's the way to begin the conversation, but not the way to end it. Because artificial general intelligence has capabilities that uranium doesn't. Uranium doesn't rewrite its own molecular structure. Uranium isn't smarter than we are. uranium, there's a long list of, by the way, I have a paper, you go to my website somewhere, we can give you a paper where it's an ongoing document going through all this sort of stuff in far more detail. So AGI management, beginning with the image of the International Atomic Energy Agency, is a good way to begin the conversation, because then somebody knows what you're talking about. But then you say, now, you've got to figure out a system that's going to evolve all the time. International Atomic Energy Agency really doesn't do that. So we are going to have to create a management system that has never existed before on the planet, because we're looking at a management problem that's never existed before on the planet. So we're going to have to be really imaginative to do this. But we can start by writing on notes, sharing the stuff, and just get the conversation going. Okay, let's see. What is this here? AGIY. Oh, this is an important point. There's a discussion a little bit about the risk of narrow AI causing some unemployment, but general is a much bigger deal. And yet some people say, you futurists, every time there's a big change, you say there's going to be all this unemployment. And it doesn't happen. There's more jobs get created all the time. So what's different this time? Well, let me tell you what's different this time. One, the acceleration of technological change is much different than from the agricultural age to the industrial age, and different from the industrial age to the communication age. Secondly, thank you. Another one is when we got packet switching that got the internet going around the world, you had to get into a jet plane to make the thing happen. Now, with a keystroke, we can transfer the technology. So having the internet to transfer technology instantaneously worldwide, and AI that can teach each other simultaneously. So if you learn something in Germany, it can be used here the next second. That kind of technology transfer is also quite different. We've never had an opportunity. With this constant rate of AI change, you don't have a chance to adjust. The laptop that I use today looks sort of like the laptop I had in 1992. More capability, but I got used to carrying it and using it and so forth. We won't have that same chance of adjusting as easily. Billions of unemployed or billions of empowered people connecting to markets worldwide gives much more creativity, which means much more change of stuff. So we may do, in the last part, we may move from a jobs economy. There'll still be, I think, 1 billion people by 2050 employed in regular jobs. But the other 5 billion working age are going to have to connect to markets worldwide to create their own kind of livelihoods, which is a different one. Anyway, so recommendations is begin to write the rules, and it doesn't matter whether they're great. Just begin. Secondly, everybody involved should be playing with AI, just like a toy. Play around with it, mess around, so you get a feel for what you're talking about. And I guess I should stop here. Yep.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jerome. Van a tener disponible la presentación de él en línea como uno de los documentos de la cumbre. También tendrán la oportunidad, terminado este panel, de poder empezar a trabajar y a intercambiar con algunas de estas ideas en la instancia de taller que tendremos. Por eso creo que han repartido en cada uno de sus lugares un mapa con los distintos grupos que habrán en español, en inglés, y uno multilingüe que quedará aquí en esta sala. Entonces, dicho esto, damos la bienvenida a Clem Bessol. Clem, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. It is a pleasure and honor to be here speaking to you. You are parliamentarians doing foresight, and at the moment you're doing foresight about AI. You are the leaders of foresight in your parliaments. And I started my career studying foresight in the US Congress. There wasn't much going on, so I had a very long dissertation. And I spent much of my career working with governments in foresight in the ensuing years, and have evolved a way of thinking about foresight that I was struck by the President's comments last night that parliaments deal with issues primarily because they're problems or challenges, too seldom dealing with benefit or with vision. And I'd argue that foresight needs to incorporate and think about both, and I'll say more about that. I've also,
You got to point this way.
this way, I've also, in getting ready for this, I really enjoyed going over the results of the first summit of your future committees, and then did some more research and put together a paper where I tried to say what aspects of foresight work are you doing in relation to the three prime parliamentary functions of representation, policy making, and accountability. And this paper is available or will be available at the website for the conference. I'd invite you to look at it because I've placed your Parliament's activities into those, and I'd love to know whether I got it right and what I missed. Also, to give you, I tried to say, can AI help me with this? So I used BARD, which is the, I get them mixed up, it's the Googles. And you know, part of the problem with AI at the moment in ChatGPT is it hallucinates. So I invite you to see whether your Parliament got hallucinated about. There are three in this version. I should also say, and this I completed 10 days ago or a week ago, and in the meantime, BARD has come out with an update, and when I reran the same questions, it reduced the hallucination and focused on a couple of others. But so I invite you to look at the paper, email me on any corrections or additions or things that I missed. I think it's, I'm very interested, and I will refine that and ultimately publish that. But what I wanted to focus on today is anticipatory governance around AI. That's the task that Lydia has given me for this talk. And I want to say, in terms of really managing the peril and the promise of AI, and that's dealing with its promise and its side effects. Jerry has argued, and as I look at this arena, Jerry and his Millennium Project work in what you've just heard is among the most advanced from the futurist community of what must be done, what should be done. And there's lots of issues and debate about it, but it's the most structured that I've seen. So I encourage you to think about that, and the managing the peril is profound. I was amused, the US Senate has had major meetings on AI. At one of those, I was watching, and a Republican senator said to the IBM, the speaker from IBM, "This is a crazy moment. You from IBM are telling us that you want the federal government to regulate AI." And she said, yes. And it is a changing moment, and as some of the earlier panels today said, you know, there are things going on now that a year ago or 2 years ago would have seemed preposterous, but they're increasingly happening. And so Jerry's advice is well taken about moving to anticipate things. So, but what I want to talk about is, what is anticipatory governance? What's it mean for the context of your work? And I would say that there are some characteristics of anticipatory governance. One, it takes a look at the big picture. Whole futures, whole systems is part of this. Second, anticipatory governance is best guided by strong shared vision. Our task as individuals and societies is to create the future we prefer. That happens best with visions that are shared visions developed looking at values and creating that. Also, anticipatory governance needs to involve continuously public participation and learning. Having said those sort of preconditions, in terms of specific tasks for foresight and futures literacy, and I take those to be the same thing. It's sort of futures literacy as a way of talking about learning and doing that uses the future in a structured way. For me, what comes out of that is the things that your committees and your parliaments and your anticipatory governance systems need to be doing is providing early warning of threats and opportunities, understanding the systems that you're in, doing alternative futures, developing and looking at different future space. Scenarios are a common, powerful technique for that. Designing alternatives, those are designs. Get to the point of saying, what is it that we need either by policy, by regulation, as Jerry's just done, or what's likely in terms of the designs of the substantive things we're talking about. And prioritize what needs management. I'll say in a minute, 2 explorations I would recommend for managing AI that raise these questions. Anticipate side effects, and in particular, think about the chain of what's the side effect and the side effect after that, and how does that play out. I'll use and urge you to use the example of the side effects of job loss to automation. And then finally, oversight. All of your committees are responsible for doing oversight, for holding accountability for the areas of their jurisdictions and the departments they're related to. The foresight component of your oversight is to keep checking the quality of the assumptions and forecasts and the achievement of goals. So those are the functions of anticipatory governance. What many people have talked about the uncertainty, the VUCA environment that we live in, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That's definitely the case. For foresight, what it means is that predictions are impossible. You cannot say and should not try to say this is what's going to happen, to have the prediction of the future. On the other hand, forecasts, as difficult as they are needed, particularly alternative forecasts that make you explore what the different pathways might be. And finally, vision is critical. Part of the issue about the VUCA environment is that things change rapidly. You need flexibility and agility. Part of what makes you agile is having a shared vision that has defined your North Star, that has defined your directions. And in that context, you know why you're changing and what you need to change to. And having said that, most of your work in parliaments and in government, if you think about vision, strategy, and tactics and operations, most of your work is with tactics and operations and, to a certain extent, strategy. Far less of your work and time and focus is on vision. And that's, I think, very important to make sure that your government, your ecosystem, is vision capable and vision, that your vision is moving, motivating to you and to the nation. Having said that, given the importance that I believe of vision in foresight, hooray for Agenda 2030. Agenda 2030 represents the shared vision of the world. Every nation in the world has endorsed Agenda 2030, and we argue that you should have a vision and then you should have stretch targets, audacious goals, or big, hairy, audacious goals, depending on when you looked and when you have gotten into this. The SDGs represent the world's stretch targets to achieve the vision. They are truly significant. I'd argue that if your national vision is not up to date or not moving, since your country has, and I apply this to my own country first, The closest thing to a shared vision in the United States right now is our commitment to the Agenda 2030, and use that to pursue it. And in reviewing the futures work, or the work of the futures committees, it is heartening to see the depth of the SDG monitoring and oversight that is built into the work of future committees. So in terms of government and the understanding the peril and promise, taking the long term, looking at anticipatory designs are important. And those 5 objectives in red are what I would argue you need to be working on. Let me give you 2 exploratory topics, explorations, related to this anticipatory governance and AI. First, accelerating and managing the right stuff. What's that look like? And the right technologies and applications. And secondly, anticipating and designing systems for after massive job loss. I won't speak much about these, but just to say that the right stuff, and this is, if you're on the Science and Technology Committee and dealing with innovation, you know all of the issues around picking winners. What I'm arguing is that be a step back and say, what are the directions that need to be put in place? What are the equivalent of the guidelines and railings for the applications of AI? It varies across these various technologies, and they're a real promise for AI to be delivered. In doing this, I would say you have a great resource from your fellow Committee on the Future. Finland has done a report called Toward Better Futures, and it looked at 20 technology application clusters and asked, when those get put in place, how would they contribute or not to the 17 SDGs? A very complex assessment. And culturally, when you look at it, you might disagree. Technologically, you might. It's 4 years old. This is a field moving so fast. But it is an excellent job of beginning this question of picking the right stuff in relation to these emerging technologies. And the second exploration is when I looked at that Toward a Better Future report and thought about, I agree with Jerry Glenn that we will see massive job loss. The latest report it said maybe as many as 1/3 of jobs globally by sometime in the 2030s or beyond will disappear. And the question is, what's that mean? And so I'd encourage you to look at the consequences, but start with 4 lenses. What's it mean for personal meaning? Deaths of despair accompany job loss in many cases, but there's a larger set of meaning. And the question is, what are the options for us to have meaning and to pursue it? What kind of community, what kind of personal identity, vision do we want? How does that relate to equity in our communities and whether our basic needs are getting met? The second is self-sufficiency. The technologies for, you've heard about nanotechnology as engines of creation. Well, the question is, what kinds of things can they create? How much self-sufficiency could a family or household, a community or city have to self-produce? On the other hand, economics and business, what will job loss, increased productivity mean? And will it decentralize and make SMEs better able to compete? Will location disappear as we 3D print things? Or will 3D printing allow you to move things into the home you don't need to be produced? But all of that is significant to say that we will need, likely, increased welfare payments, possibly a universal basic income. And I'm getting the hook, but I'll move quick. But but figuring out tax systems. We need, in effect, companies to make enough profit to fund the enhanced welfare payments that will be required. Simultaneously, look at what degree of self-sufficiency could accrue so that there's less cash needed. But those are things I encourage you to take long-term views for anticipatory governance in and related to AI. So my final comments are congratulations for being involved in committees of the future and foresight. Manage AI, as Jerry Glenn suggests, look at that and sort that out. Keep promoting foresight in your policy system and among the public. Prepare to use AI to accelerate foresight. Luckily, that will be part of the conversation tomorrow. And advance global sharing of foresight tools, resources, and support. And I'd say that's part of the networking that you should be using this group for going forward. Thank you, and again, please, if you look at the paper, email me to that address, my address, clembeasold@gmail.com, with any additions, comments, and whether you thought you got hallucinated about correctly or not. Thank you.
Or not. Thank you very much, Clem. Well, now we are asking Dr. Latifa very challenging work. She will comment on what Jerome Glenn and Clem Besol explained to us, shared to us, and maybe she will resignify because she has a lot of experience as a parliamentarian, also knowledge about AI, governance, and principle with putting ethics in the middle. So thank you very much, Latifa.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
To be with us. The floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Lydia. Thank you. Dear Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I will try to speak Spanish this time. Hola, and marhaba, wassalamu alaikum, and peace be upon you, and for now, and for the future of humanity, now and all the way along. It's my pleasure to be with you. I know that it's a very short time that I joined this panel as a commentator for the discussion and presentations that those distinguished speakers, Mr. Jury and Mr. Clem, have already showed us, which is very challenging. It's not easy for me at all to give these compliments and comments around futuristics, because I know it's from my experience. My background is a scientist. I'm a professor in AI and law, so very rigid, I would say, very rigid in terms of knowing what exactly we need to know, and logic-based, and comparing to the futuristics dimension, they are always adding this challenging flavor to the scientists and to the regulators to know what exactly they need for the future. Thank you so much again, Lydia, and just to give you a brief about my experience as a parliamentarian, I'm working in the IT committee and the Trade and Investment Committee, so we are trying to manage what need for the IT between the two. And for the regulation, I mean for the IT and for the startups in Saudi Arabia. Please, I will switch hats today between being an advisor and scientific and being a parliamentarian. So I will try to wrap up. Any problems? Yeah. So I will wrap up my speech into three dimensions. The first one is focusing on the artificial narrow intelligence in the beginning. Mr. Jerry has explained the AI general intelligence and AI narrow intelligence. And another word, what I could tell about AI general intelligence is that we are combining several AI narrow systems to provide much more autonomy to the new systems, and this is what we are really freaking out from, and this is what we need to regulate. and because that would make it more autonomous systems. So before, when I heard about, like what he has mentioned before, when we heard about the artificial general intelligence, I thought that this is something after 10 years or 15 years. But starting from last year in November 22, when ChatGPT was there, it's like this is where we, like what you have already said, it's like making us surprised, and we thought in the beginning that this is maybe the beginning of the general intelligence. And I could tell that this is like the map or the bridge between the narrow and the general intelligence. And as what he said, from my perspective, I think AI, general intelligence, is now very, very, very close. He was very optimistic in saying 3 to 5 years, and I might say the same or maybe less as well. I will start from my experience in governance, the narrow AI, and efforts around AI governance in Saudi Arabia, if that's fine. He mentioned the IEEE standards and OECD principles, where Saudi Arabia, as a member of G20, plays a very important role during the presentation of G20 during the pandemic as well, to reach an agreement around the updated version of those principles and establishment of the Digital Cooperation Organization to enhance the talk about innovation and policies between the countries. It was also my honor to be part of the UNESCO recommendation on ethics as an ad hoc expert group. We were 24 members, where we drafted the recommendation of AI ethics, and now it has been agreed among all the member states. And this is where Saudi Arabia plays a great role in those ethics. And since from that side we established or we drafted already with the UNESCO the Saudi AI ethics in terms of we're trying to combine several standards and ethical principles and policies together in the whole AI life cycle, from the idea and design to the deployment of the AI, moving along the data and building or the development of the system. For each life cycle, we have a set of standards and supporting tools, and this is like provided to all the government authority, to the data centers of the government authority, to start establishing and applying those ethical principles in every system that we are trying to develop from the government. Of course, we need incentives in this, so we provided incentives in terms of like a license, but that is platinum or gold or bronze license for every entity. Also, we have, a few months ago, we have announced about the Center of AI Ethics and Research. It's going to be a global center to have this global talk around AI ethics and the narrow intelligence, and moving forward, of course, to the general intelligence as long as we are developing. Of course, Saudi Arabia as well, maybe most of you have heard about this. They have already arranged and organized 2 global summits around AI for humanity to discuss several issues, 2 of them ones in 2021 and 2022. And maybe something that is very important to mention here as a distinctive and, to Saudi, that most of the tech leaders in Saudi have like 50% of them are women who's working on the data scientist, as data scientist lead for several companies and AI and government entities. So I'm just wrapping up, what did we do as an AI narrow governance, and what exactly we want to do to help the regulation as member of the parliament. So I've tried to capture some of those sentences from the presentation. I think from Mr. Jerry, he mentioned that Parliament will have to create their national artificial narrow intelligence and artificial general intelligence regulatory system. However, this needs time. You mentioned as well the artificial general intelligence governance without making sure that rules and guardrails is right. This is going to be also a challenging part. So from my opinion, maybe thinking about regulating artificial general intelligence is really challenging because we are regulating the unknown. So this is kind of different than the artificial narrow intelligence because in the narrow, the systems were there so we can mitigate the risks and understand it. In the artificial general intelligence, there is this dilemma between the regulation because the systems are not there, and at the same time, the acceleration of those systems is not compatible and it's not in synchronization with the time required for the regulation. So I think most of the talks today I've heard is like they are having this scale of a humanity. We have a humanity scale between regulation and the economy. And we are trying to balance between those two as much as we can. And I think we need, like what you have mentioned, Mr. Clem, that we need to manage between the good and bad, and we manage to between the pull and push. So what I didn't hear about in this on today's meeting is about the future of regulation itself. We need innovation in regulation. We need to have iterative or agile iterative governance and regulation as well. We didn't hear about having sandboxes, like regulatory sandboxes, instead of having regulatory or law enforcement regulation. In my opinion, I think it will be very difficult to have a rigid regulation at this stage. We have some existing systems or existing regulation that might cover something related to AI, which are, for example, the copyright. Many of the copyright things have already, it might cover something related to AI. So it's very important that we that this might cause regulatory uncertainty and regulatory gaps that will cause also, that will help, we need to pay the price maybe here of having another risks that we didn't mitigate, or other, or slowing, for example, the adoption of AI. So in others to those regulatory uncertainty and gaps, we need to innovate. Innovate regulation, innovate the governance, having those multi-stakeholders governance group, an agile, iterative approach. And from my opinion, I think we need to have those two things, starting with the sandbox in the beginning, and at the same time drafting a regulation. That will help us very much in following up about the updates and moving also the economy as well. I will mention that in the next step as well. Innovative governance and regulation will help in providing also trust to the users and to the business and to the investors, and innovating also responsible AI. So from parliamentarian, I would say, work, let's divide our role into two areas, as parliamentarian and as administrative people in the parliament. So as parliamentarians, all the committees of the parliament, with no exception, they should work in multi-stakeholder groups to provide and provide immediate calls for action. I give you examples from what we are doing in our parliament. For example, we have the culture committee that focus also on protecting the values on the media, protecting our values on the media. We have the labor committee, who's also providing, I would say, suggestions and advices to understand the impact of AI on the labor market, and the same as well for the education and health. They also provide use cases to foster the implementation of the SDGs. promote coherence between the regulations, study the impact of data and AI on the sectors that they are specified in, reviewing the compatibility of the current laws with the changes, and also providing sandbox. Okay. We are studying and drafting AI regulation, which I think it's very important for every parliament to start studying and drafting this AI regulation. However, what I'm afraid of is the implementation, or if you are forced to the implementation of those regulations. We need to review the impact of the guidelines and standards and a sandbox that we have already established. Engaging in parliamentary discussion like what we are doing now, and be also making sure that all the parliaments are part of the AI events. And from administrative side, I think it's very important that every parliament has a data center, security center, innovation center to, like what Mr. Clem has said, is to improve the strategy for the parliament in order toward the vision that we want for our future. Also, we need, maybe this is something that is I don't see in many parliaments. It's applying AI in the parliament work. So up to date, the use cases of AI in parliament are still very limited, and the future studies should go on that. So we need to use AI in finding the gaps between the laws, summarizing and saving time and reading documents, highlighting the importance parts of each document, and comparing between the laws as well. Maybe the last comment that I have is about the recommendation. I think one of the recommendations that I have seen in the slides is about regulatory requirements by the companies. And I'm not sure if we are really happy about what the companies are said. Like what Mr. Clem has said, it's IBM themselves really want a regulation, but what's exactly the role of IBM in protecting the people? And that's exactly what I have already mentioned. Maybe the things that we need to add as well is the importance of involving entrepreneurs and the investors and VCs in the discussion around the governance of AI, whether it is narrow or general AI. And investing in technical solutions to AI risks and supporting the research and innovation in this area. Sorry for taking more time, and thanks very much. Okay.
Hello? Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Latifa. Thank you very much, all the three panelists. I think that Dr. Latifa, I will speak in Spanish, ha facilitado, creo que en gran parte, este puntapié inicial al trabajo de todos los honorables miembros parlamentarios, pudiendo hacer una traducción desde dos ámbitos de conocimientos que tienen que ver con esto del uso del futuro, de la gobernanza anticipatoria, a una forma aplicada en el Parlamento, en un contexto inédito, como ya se ha venido mencionando, en el que estamos, donde los desafíos que nos coloca estos tiempos se superponen, ¿sí?, a los desafíos que ya teníamos, pero en este caso nos demanda, además de la urgencia, la atención a la emergencia, es decir, a estos fenómenos emergentes nuevos que requieren de otros paradigmas y sobre todo de un salto paradigmático. Entre otras cosas, requiere de la articulación de diversos conocimientos, de la inter y transdisciplina, de la inteligencia colectiva. Entonces, los vamos a invitar, luego de tener ahora un espacio para preguntas y cederle al presidente de la Comisión de Futuros que dirija unos 20 minutos, media hora de preguntas y respuestas que estén enfocadas, por favor, en esta temática y que puedan ayudar al trabajo que vamos a ir teniendo en las instancias de taller, de workshops. Tengan en cuenta de que ahí en esos espacios se va a poder pasar a interactuar y a dar una bajada a todo esto que viene siendo presentado desde hoy temprano a la mañana. Así que desde un enfoque de anticipación responsable, que agradezco mucho a los tres panelistas, y bueno, en un mundo que nos exige en estos momentos mucho coraje. Podemos mirar para el costado y dejar pasar esta situación, o podemos ponernos a actuar de manera inmediata. Así que bueno, muchas gracias, muy buenas tardes.
Bien, gracias. Tenemos unos minutos antes de pasar primero al coffee break y luego a los workshops. Si alguien me pide la palabra, tenemos unos minutos. ¿A quién tenemos? Adelante, le dan el micrófono acá. It's okay. No.
Okay.
It's
It works. Thank you. So, thank you very much for this. I have had a question that's been burning on me all day, and it's really a question about surveillance capitalism, which is kind of the current business model of big tech and social media when it comes to tracking people online, figuring out what their weaknesses are, selling that data to the highest bidder so that they can affect our behavior, change our behavior, profit from it. This is a business model that's fundamentally anti-democratic, it's anti-human, and I worry what will happen if we allow that business model to continue when AI enters into it. So this is something that I just feel is necessary to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, gracias, muchas gracias. Señor Sobato and you too.
Muchísimas gracias. I'm going to do it in Spanish, the question. Muchísimas gracias, Glenn. Disfruté muchísimo su intervención. Tengo dos dudas. Usted dijo que el tema central de la inteligencia artificial es que no sabemos en la tercera fase, la superinteligencia, cómo va a evolucionar, ni cuánto va a evolucionar. El último libro de Henry Kissinger y Smith hablan de que del 2021, en los próximos 15 años, estamos hablando del ex CEO de Google, que pasó 10 años como CEO de Google, su estimación es que del 2021, en los próximos 15 años, la inteligencia artificial va a aumentar su capacidad en 1 millón de veces. ¿Qué es aumentar capacidad en 1 millón de veces? Muy difícil de comprenderlo. Entonces usted fue estableciendo una cadena de cómo en un momento determinado, prácticamente como si fuera la película Odisea 2001, en un momento uno tiene que hacer apagar el sistema en el caso de que vaya fuera de control. El tema central que hemos escuchado de los padrinos de la inteligencia artificial, de la gente que ha estado trabajando en Google y en otras de las 5 grandes empresas y que han renunciado para poder hablar con libertad, es que consideran de que en un momento determinado podemos perder el control por la capacidad que tiene la superinteligencia artificial de reproducirse a sí misma. Si la capacidad de inteligencia artificial tiene la capacidad de reproducirse a sí misma, de aprender a sí misma, como ha ocurrido, por ejemplo, en el tema del ajedrez, ¿cómo podemos garantizar de que en 50 años, 100 años, 150 años, esa superinteligencia no va a violar los principios de detener? Es decir, yo creo que por primera vez la humanidad está enfrentando un riesgo que jamás tuvo, para el cual no sabemos cómo vamos a poder detenerlo. Y eso me parece que es un cambio, un game changer completamente diferente de todo lo que hemos conocido.
Gracias.
¿Cuál es su respuesta?
Gracias.
I'm highly delighted and privileged to be part of this very important seminar, which is telling very, very important on the outcome to humanity. I want to say my take on the area of technology. Technological revolution, evolution, and innovation for me is a welcome development for humanity, because I look at this as an upgrade of previous civilization. Because we have to focus primarily as legislators on the credibility of data and the accessibility for data. That should be as the gateway. That's the most primary and the most important, which is the lifeline of any given technology. Data is the most important. We have to focus on that primarily. After that, to pay a proper attention and focus on making laws to regulate the technological aspect, including the AI and all other artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies in the area of environment, agriculture, military, production, culture, education, and curriculum, and the policies for both private and public sectors. Because you have to have a strategic, deliberate, stationed, that will be a gateway. Data is the number one. All this we are talking about, data is the most primary. We have to create a gateway to start from the data itself, because it is the data is the lifeline of all other technological inventions and innovations. And to create data to be very, very available and with a credibility, so that an equal opportunity can be provided to big and small stakeholders. That is my take. Thank you very much.
Thank you. From Finland, raise your hand, please. Okay.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much for these very interesting insights to all speakers. I would like to take on where my Icelandic colleague left off when she presented a dystopy. How about a utopy of really how states and nations and regions could prioritize the use of IA to benevolent uses for the good of mankind? Would that be possible in any ways without infringing with free enterprise? I'm asking this because the Hiroshima process of G7 countries that want to find governance of AI is actually highlighting the need for global governance in an unanticipated way. The OECD reports is reproducing a questionnaire that was given to G7 countries, the wealthiest countries and most powerful countries in the world, of their priorities. Where should AI provide best opportunities? So in fields of productivity gains and promoting innovation and entrepreneurship, all 7 countries agreed. Well, this is literally a first world problem, because when presented a question, how about eradicating poverty and hunger, none of the 7 chose that option for AI's use. So what are your comments on this? could we globally and communally prioritize AI for the best use for humankind? Thank you.
Thank you. From Iceland, please raise your hand.
Yeah, thank you very much for very interesting seminars. What disturbs me when we discuss artificial intelligence today is the constant talk about some kind of evolution, and it says in several pages here, always the talk about the evolution, but we are seeing technology in exponential development. So for me, it's not a symptom of evolution, it's a revolution, and we're seeing revolution maybe each 2 months. And it's clear for me that you have to meet revolutions in a totally different way than you are facing evolution. And I want to ask you, because I agree we have to take it seriously, the legislation. For some weeks or months ago, several scientists, futurists, and even technology gurus said we had to put a stop to it temporarily while we were thinking about the consequences. What do you say about that? Thank you.
Gracias. From India.
Perhaps one of the biggest complexities of the present day and times is the emergence of disruptive technologies like artificial intelligence, which are posing a real challenge to the law and the policy makers world over. The kind of traction which the use of artificial system is gaining in various sectors, the government are faced with a situation where they are required to come to terms with them and erect suitable regulatory frameworks within their respective models of governance. The complex world of artificial intelligence is a major challenge for them to surmount insofar as the regulation of artificial intelligence systems and processes is concerned. The challenge is equally bigger and complex for the Parliament as well, which are required to provide a robust and futuristic regulatory and legislative framework through well thought throughout and thoroughly deliberated and debated pieces of legislation. Undoubtedly, the task at hand for the parliaments is onerous and very challenging because the issue at stake pertain not just to regulation but also to ethics, privacy, transparency, biases, manipulations, and above all about the unemployment which it is going to create and how it has to be introduced in a phased manner. So these are all we have to discuss. Therefore, the challenges posed to the democratic are complex and manifold. With their collective and collaborative efforts and shared experience, parliaments are required to embark upon a journey to find out the solutions for the present from the future as part of their anticipatory legislative task. So my question is, how is that is going to affect the workforce? Will it not create unemployment? Are we thinking over that by introduction of this artificial intelligence? How are we going to generate more employments or create any guarantees for the existing persons who are employed?
Thank you. From Kenya.
Very much. I've been sitting down here and listening to all the presentations, and one thing is apparently clear to me, that we are indeed in control, and what we may need to start thinking about is the issue of what is referred to as unintended consequences. Now, the question to the experts, Jerome and Glenn, for artificial intelligence to be able to be in place, behind the scene there has to be a human being who is able to control that. Earlier on, our biggest fear has been the issue of autonomy of the artificial intelligence. How can we, as legislators, prevent that? Because Jerome, you've spoken about the general artificial intelligence, and you've warned us about it not being controlled and being left to take a life of its own. What is it that we can do so that we do not over-legislate, neither do we leave it as a free fall for all the companies to be able to compete? So the question is, how do we stop this autonomy of artificial intelligence so that it is always controlled? Because the danger is, with the autonomy of artificial intelligence, if there's a human being behind it, politically, there's no way we can be able to run away from dictators who would probably use machine to be able to get what they want. So my question to you is this, and all of us here, as we ponder on this issue of the unintended consequences of our human brain contributing, how do we stop the issue of autonomy of the artificial intelligence? Thank you.
Thank you. From Mexico. Raise your hands, please. Yes, yes, and after that. After that, yes, yes. After that.
Okay. After.
It's okay. Yes, yes, it's okay.
Gracias. Buenas tardes. Excelentes exposiciones por parte de los panelistas. Y aquí quiero hacer algunas reflexiones antes de iniciar con mi pregunta. Las reflexiones es que tenemos muchísimos desafíos, los han marcado en las diapositivas, sobre todo los desafíos en inteligencia artificial en el tema de género. Creo que no lo hemos tocado en el tema de género, en donde hay usurpación de identidad sobre imágenes de mujeres en el mundo y en las redes sociales sobre todo. El segundo desafío que tenemos es en la ciberseguridad. Algunos de los panelistas decían el crimen organizado. Creo que es un tema que tiene mucho para el debate, mucho para el centrarse en cada uno de los países, sobre todo en países conflictivos, en donde tenemos mucho del crimen organizado como en nuestro país. Otro de los desafíos, y que creo que aquí es el más fuerte o al que nos vamos a enfrentar los legisladores, es cómo sabemos que la parte de todo, y lo dijeron muchos, surge desde el Parlamento, desde los legisladores, regular la inteligencia artificial, regularla, pero partiendo de la ética. ¿Y cómo regulamos la ética si en algunos países con los usos y costumbres puede ser hasta subjetiva? Esa sería mi pregunta. ¿Cuál sería la opinión de ustedes como expertos para poder regular desde la ética a la inteligencia artificial?
Thank you. From Morocco. Yes, it's okay, it's okay. It's okay.
مساء الخير. بما أنني عربية أقول أن هناك دول عربية تمتلك حكومات بدأت في الاستثمار في مجال الذكاء الاصطناعي، لكن هناك دول تتراجع في هذا المجال بسبب الأزمات التي تمر بها اقتصاديا وسياسيا، بجانب البنى التحتية الصعبة التي لا تسمح بالعمل والتطور في المجال. أزمة تتمثل في أن اللغة العربية تعد من أصعب اللغات المستخدمة في الذكاء الاصطناعي بسبب اختلاف اللهجات في الدول العربية. تعاني دول عربية من فجوة رقمية وتعليمية مقارنة بأوروبا وأمريكا. العالم العربي يسير بأكثر من سرعة في سباق الذكاء الاصطناعي. نتساءل إذن عن الفترة الزمنية اللازمة لهذه الدول المتأخرة لمنافسة الدول الأخرى. وبما أنني أتساءل عن ألعاب الأطفال القائمة على الذكاء الاصطناعي، كيف سنتعامل مع الخصوصية إذا كان سيتعامل أطفالنا مع الروبوتات؟ سيتم جمع أفكار الطفل، كلماته الأولى، أساليب التعلم الخاصة به. كيف سيتم حماية البيانات الخاصة به؟ من سيمتلك البيانات ويستثمرها. اللعبة تستمع في المنزل، من يضمن لنا أنها لا تستمع إلى ما يجري فيه؟ الذكاء الاصطناعي هل سيختار ما سيفعله أبناؤنا بدلا منا؟ هل سيستخدم الطفل خياله؟ وهل سيكون له أصدقاء؟ وشكرا لكم.
Thank you. From Paraguay, and the last one, United Kingdom. Please, Paraguay.
Ok, muchas gracias. Primeramente agradecerle por la invitación. Y yo creo que todos estamos coincidiendo y estamos buscando para que podamos regular la inteligencia artificial. Entonces, como decía uno que me antecedió en el uso de palabra, es momento de actuar, porque hoy, hasta donde yo sé, ni siquiera hasta el momento no podemos reconocer en la hora de crear una cuenta en Facebook, porque se puede hacer con cédulas de otras personas, inclusive de personas muertas, y empiezan a operar de esa cuenta, diciendo lo malo o lo bueno de una persona, de otras personas. Entonces, en mi país es una peculiaridad y un modo operandi desde las cárceles para estafarles a personas. Entonces yo creo que es momento de, y no hablo solamente de esta cuenta, sino que de todas las cuentas que se pueda utilizar a través de las redes sociales. Entonces, entiendo que la libertad de expresión, de pensamiento, etcétera, se reduce en democracia, pero que esa democracia no sea para dañar la susceptibilidad de otros. Nosotros los parlamentarios, antes de estos avances de la inteligencia artificial, debemos de darle herramientas urgentemente al Poder Judicial para que se tomen medidas en ese sentido. Porque sabemos que la tecnología también trae desarrollo, muchos desarrollos, pero tiene su consecuencia. Y hacer respetar dentro del marco legal, regulación y traer el futuro al presente. Viva Paraguay y viva el mundo. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, United Kingdom. Please raise your hand. Please raise your hand. Just raise your hand. No, it's okay, it's okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Fundamental question for me, and I'm listening to the questions already been asked, is who are the fundamental winners and the fundamental losers? Inequality and poverty across the world is now becoming increasing. 2.2 billion people cannot get access to fresh water, let alone the latest AI technology. So who's going to own this and who's going to benefit from it? And how is it going to challenge, how is it going to take on the biggest challenges we face, which include, as we've heard today, perhaps 60% of the world's population no longer in employment, and of course the big existential threat we have, which is climate change. And my last point, I heard about mention of universal basic income. This is something that Scotland, I know, and Iceland has already spoke earlier, and New Zealand is looking at through the well-being economy. Is this something we want to see rolled out across the world? Thank you.
Thank you. Bolivia. It's okay, continúe.
Muy buenas tardes a cada uno de ustedes. Es un honor estar en este Parlamento junto con el mundo. Algo que creo que el mayor peligro para la inteligencia artificial somos nosotros, los seres humanos. No así la inteligencia artificial para nosotros. ¿Por qué lo digo? Porque el que no está sabiendo manejar lo que es una tecnología en este tema, somos nosotros los seres humanos. Para regularizarlo, tanto en ética, en ámbito laboral y en todo aspecto, tenemos que aprender un poquito en el tema de lo que es la inteligencia artificial para no llegar a un descontrol, no llegar a un descontrol luego nosotros mismos. Quejarnos es lo que muchos estamos haciendo de una inteligencia, de una tecnología que está llegando muy avanzado rápidamente, y es donde nosotros tenemos que enfocarnos como seres humanos para que no nos descontrolen ni nos descontrolemos nosotros con lo que es inteligencia artificial. Tengo dos preguntas para nuestros panelistas, excelente exposición que nos han dado. Una de ellas es, ¿cómo sería la estrategia de mitigación para anticipar y abordar las posibles consecuencias negativas de la inteligencia artificial? ¿Y cómo podemos garantizar el desarrollo de la AI evitando que se vulneren los derechos humanos fundamentales y principios éticos y que se evite cualquier forma de discriminación o sesgo algorítmico? Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias. And the last one from Congo. No,
Merci. Je vais parler en français. Je crois que l'intelligence artificielle nous place à un moment particulier du développement technologique et dans notre histoire. La courte question que je voudrais poser est la suivante. Venant par exemple de l'Afrique, de ces pays où le niveau technologique est relativement bas par rapport aux pays développés et où le développement de l'intelligence artificielle se pose en termes de défis de moyens, de ressources, en termes de formation, comment est-ce que nous pouvons éviter que l'intelligence artificielle n'ait pas développé davantage pour perpétuer un certain impérialisme des pays développés? Comment éviter que l'intelligence artificielle n'ait pas utilisé davantage pour exploiter les plus pauvres, pour perpétuer l'injustice que l'on voit déjà au niveau universel? Comment éviter que l'intelligence artificielle n'est pas utilisée par les pays les plus développés et leurs multinationales pour exercer et transmettre en fait un certain impérialisme culturel des civilisations sur d'autres? Voilà ma courte question.
Thank you. Jerome, maybe you need artificial intelligence to answer in 5 minutes.
Yes.
We agree that you should go first.
Okay, all right. So many things to say. One, you may remember 20 years ago, viruses were a very big deal. And computer viruses, right, were a big deal. They still are. There's far more viruses probably now than before, but what do? We decentralize the responsibility to the user. I buy antivirus software and run around a bunch of countries, and somehow my computer still works. We're going to have to decentralize, not all of it, but we've got to decentralize some of the problem to address the question, the first one. Can I buy, eventually, a software to protect my data, to protect the manipulation of photographs, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da? And the answer is yeah. It won't do everything, just like antivirus software doesn't do everything. It's still not perfect, but it really has drastically reduced the problem. And I would say that's one part of the answer. Again, it's not a total, but so one is that we users have to figure out our responsibilities as well as the state and the UN. So that's one. Two, there's a group called Frontier Model of Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, and Anthropic. There'll be some others coming in. But they're trying to address exactly these questions themselves because they want to make a business successful, not unsuccessful. So they're trying to figure out these questions themselves. And I would ask you to, if you have any of the reps from those countries here, of the companies, ask them, how do I keep abreast of what you said? And I can throw in some questions and so forth. So that's another part. A third comment is that a lot of these issues, please, one, give them to yourself because that's your assignment to yourself on how do you regulate. But the other part I would assign is that you talk to your foreign ministry Because your president or your prime minister is going to be giving a speech next year at the UN on the summit. And I've been involved in the preparations, and I'm not so happy because what happens is a lot of people say, I work on disabilities. So with the input, disabilities in the future. In other words, there's no change. In other words, people are working on issues all over the world. The summit on the future was supposed to be the summit of the future civilization. These questions you're asking are future of civilization questions. Turn them over to your foreign minister as well. Every country is supposed to say something in the summit on the future. And last week, there was a meeting of ministers. They're supposed to say, what's the agenda for the summit on the future? You might want to contact your foreign minister and say, what was your position? If the position was sort of, you might say, hey, you got to do a better job when you get to the big time next year. Fourth, information warfare, which is related to some of this, is a gigantic issue. It is as big an issue as the organized crime issue. It is also not being attended to well. The ability to manipulate information, as we all know, is getting very big, not just problems in the United States government, but all of us. So if country A doesn't like country B, it's cheaper to do information warfare than it is to have a military attack. And every country is realizing that. So we've also got to have anti-information warfare strategies in every country. My own country, I'm not satisfied with. And so that's a quick one. That's another one to take a look at in your work. What does an anti-information warfare strategy look like in your country, and how does that get regulated? Another is and I'll stop at this one. I guess my colleagues are getting ready to go. Last one. I mentioned briefly that the United Nations Envoy on Technology, you can Google it to get the information. There is a call for papers on that. Papers are going in. I got one. I can share it with people if you give me your stuff. And a lot of papers will be going in. I don't know if those papers are going to be publicly available. I can certainly share it. I mean, because I wrote it, so I can share it. But those papers will probably have a lot of issues that were just asked right now. That's another resource for you to take a look at, and I'll stop here.
Okay, great. And I'll start with the cluster of business and manipulation. And the manipulation question, we don't need to wait more for AI. The way I read current social media manipulation of you in terms of likes is here. That's a core tool that's being used. I would applaud Europe for its being ahead in all of these things than my country, and that in other words, it needs to be figured out what the protections are, what the anti-manipulation is, and that needs to be done. On the question of nations saying what their priorities are in terms of using AI, and none of the big seven saying poverty was on their list, is a terrible signal. And if you say sort of what's your vision, and does that have any meaning, that's not there. It also relates to essentially some combination of the image of economics and growth to saying that what are the applications that will sort of generate the most economic growth return sort of benefit in a monetized sense. What I would argue is that I believe that equity is rising, that there's an ongoing trend that is as significant as climate change. And there are ups and downs in the equity rising. In my country, there's now a bunch of attacks on it. But the question of recognizing that we need to build a future that is equitable, shared, and that we eliminate poverty. that I'd say that in its depth that is growing, and that needs to be continued, and that's both a question of vision and shared vision, and it's a question then of how do we operate. I'd say that on the company side, the ESG movement, environment, sustainability, or ethics, sustainability and governance, is an internal attempt to build some kind of concern into the operating of companies. You know, it may be weak, it may whatever, but it is an indication of equity rising there. But then I'd say that and thank you, Finland, for this Toward a Better Future report, because as I was reading that and what I suggested to you, those 4 things to look at it, it made me think that self-sufficiency, technologies, and they will need to be guided and invented in part by AI, so I call it an application, is a whole set of questions. I'd step back and say, so for governments that do promote, they spend a lot on science, technology, and innovation. They promote things, either through basic research or through applied and development. I would ask the question of directing those kind of monies to say, you know, what will solve the SDGs, what will eliminate poverty, and that governmental support of innovation move in that direction. So that I'll pass it to Latifa.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I would say that it's really hard to follow up like all these questions. There are about 14. So please allow me to pick some of them. The one that I'm really, I wrote it, I think that it's, and I totally understand what exactly they meant to regarding the question that they have. I will start maybe from the data. A lot of questions were about the data. So from how can I protect my data to the questions that is related to that everything behind AI is data, and how can we prepare our data? Yes, of course, you can't go anywhere forward without having your data, without really protecting your data, and without testing the quality of your data, and without have regulations for your data. And there is another question regarding how can I protect my privacy? Well, there are a couple of ways. The most important way is from your country, from your regulation, from your legislations, is protecting, having it's like the example of the GDPR, or how can we protect the data protection laws in general. And in Saudi we have one that we have just announced a year ago, and it's under implementation today. And there is another direction, it's going on to global, and global is always challenging to have an agreement on how to protect the data trade and the data flow between the countries, which is always an open discussion. Something else related to the human control, I think it's from Kenya. One of the approaches that we are, and one of the principles and one of the policy actions that we are working on is to have a human in the loop. That means that all the AI actors throughout the development of AI system should play a role in understanding, foresighting what exactly the risks that might be there. And if there are standardization that they are followed at each stage, then those humans their role is very important to monitor the progress of any system, to keep on in the track as a human-centric approach. However, by the development of AI and moving from narrow to general AI, then we will definitely lose this control, because the two systems will speak to each other. So what we need to know is the controlling of each system. But how could they interact with each other? This is the question, and this is what we need to govern and anticipate in the future.
Bien.
There is another...
Estamos terminando, Mrs. Estamos terminando.
Okay. Is it about the time now? All right.
Thank you.
I will take some other questions offline regarding the Arabic language. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Gracias. Muchas gracias.